Welcome to the Western Wisconsin Sports Podcast. I'm Jeremy Nagar, joined by Jordan Lehman. Jordan, how are you doing today?
Doing well.
All right, so a little different than the typical episode. What we're going to do today is focus on the changing of the WIAA playoffs that was announced last week. We do not have a coach interview today, so we'll probably go for about 30 to 35 minutes just to kind of preview what we'll see with the playoffs. So if you have not heard, there's a number of teams that opted out of the playoffs, and as a result, the WIAA reformatted all of the playoff pairings. So in a traditional year, we would be, or any school would be one of, probably 13 in a region, if you're D2 through 5. If you're D1, you would be in a less team, a 6-team region. There's usually less D1 teams. And then you would play through that region and actually have 2 regional champs out of each region that would play in the sectional semis. And then from there, you'd go to the sectional finals and then to state, sectional finals, sectional semis are all have all been played at neutral sites in the past. That's not going to be the case this year. So teams were put in 5 to 7 ish teams regions, and each of the 5 divisions are now broken into 16 regions. And then each of those 16 regions are put into 14 or 4 sections. So in any region, what you're going to have is, around 90-ish teams broken into 16 groups, sections 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then each section will include regions A, B, C, and D. And we can get more into the logistics of that. But the one big change, there won't be neutral court games for sectionals at all. And the state tournament will actually be a one-day event where the semifinals are played in the morning and the finals are played in the afternoon. So lots of big changes. Those sites haven't been determined yet. There'll be 5 of them around the state. And the state tournaments for girls will happen the weekend of February 25th and the weekend for boys of March 4th, the following weekend. So we're not sure yet if it's going to be Thursday or Friday or Saturday or what the deal is. So we're kind of playing as we go. But that's the format. So what we're going to do is we're just going to try to preview what teams in our region, there's been a lot of changes as far as division placement. So we're just going to try to preview those types of things here over the next 30 minutes or so.
Now, one thing I see a lot of, in looking at these, I see a lot of 5-team regions. Are we assuming that there's going to be a 1 seed that gets a bye into the regional semis?
In a 5-team region, what you're going to have is the 5 go to the 4 on the first night, that Tuesday. The 1 will play the winner of that game. The 2 and 3 will play each other on the next night, which is typically Friday. And then the winners of those games will play in the regional final on Saturday.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, nice job kind of previewing all of that. There's a couple of these regions that I think are pretty interesting when it comes to teams in our area. I mean, D1, there's a region right away in 1A that includes 3 of the top 4 teams in the Big Rivers in Chi-High, Hudson, and River Falls. Menominee also in that region, and Superior. And Superior's had a really young season so far. They've got a win over Northwestern. And they've also lost to Chippewa for perspective. But Northwestern is a good team. But River Falls and Hudson have more than proven themselves, and so is Chippewa, to be formidable teams. And one of those is going to make it to the section.
Yeah, so I think what you're probably looking at there is some combination of Chippewa, Hudson, and River Falls are 1, 2, and 3, and then Menominee and Superior would be 4 and 5. The part that adds some issues to this is you're going to play these teams twice. A lot of games still happen after the seeding meeting, and so it's so difficult. I know River Falls just beat Chippewa pretty handily. Do they play each other before the seeding meeting? Like, all these games and getting moved around, there's going to be teams that are seated lower that go into the playoffs having beaten a higher seeded team, maybe handily, and then have to go to their place because that wasn't taken into account. Um, so yeah, you mentioned 1A and being 3 of the top Big Rivers teams. Do you have any other things you want to highlight from?
Well, I'm curious because we actually did a game, last night in real time, Thursday night, where we cover St. Croix Falls, and St. Croix Falls is fourth in their conference, or was at the beginning of the game, but it's only because they've won fewer games. It's not because they've lost any more games than the first place team. Right now, Hudson's at 6-2, River Falls is at 4-2, and you talk about the seating meeting. What's it going to look like at these seating meetings if conference like? You normally in a season, even at a seeding meeting, teams will have similar, if not the same, games played, which result in pretty comparable conference records. But this year, there's teams like, if we look at overall records, like Somerset, who's played 17 games, teams like Hudson, who's played 2 more conference games than River Falls. Like, how does that figure into seeding?
Well, a lot of times it's, at least in the history that I've dealt with it, where you get in a room full of a lot of people, you have conference allegiances, really, or alliances. Um, and so, like Superior, it's going to be pretty easy for the Big Rivers coaches to stick together. Um, and then you just try to do your best with common opponents. You try to play it, at least in my opinion and in my experience, you try to be honest, though, because if you're trying to screw a team, that's going to come back to get you at some point.
Absolutely.
And a lot of these coaches, they sit in all conference meetings. They sit in these seating meetings. Like they know each other really well.
Mm-hmm.
And so you just try to present the facts that you have and then go off that. And you don't rank yourself, you know. The thing that gets interesting sometimes is you're allowed to appeal. And I'd assume that would be the same. And you start so that the process is you take 5 teams, so the 5 coaches will get together. And I don't know how they'll do it, if they'll do it through Zoom or what, but the 5 coaches would get together and you would get a minute to talk about your team, where you think that you deserve to be ranked. And then you get to rank the other 4 coaches. So you'd be like 1 seed, 2 seed, 3 seed, 4 seed. And then whoever's running that seeding meeting compiles those numbers. So it might be like this team puts them 1, this team puts them 2, this team puts them 3. And then you add up all the numbers, rank them lowest to highest as far as totals. And then that's your preliminary seeding with all 5 teams. And then what you do is you go back to the bottom and you say, number 5 seed, would you like to appeal up to number 4? And then the other coaches would vote on who they think should be the higher seed. So you do get some, and we had this happen last year. We appealed up, and one of the coaches that actually voted us higher than the team that I appealed against changed their vote to the other team to try to avoid us in the second round. Or later in the round. I don't exactly know when it was, and then ultimately got beat by the team that they chose to play against. And so that type of thing does happen. The added layer of uncertainty is you walk in and you say, here's who we've had be hurt. This year you're going to say, yeah, we're 8 and whatever, but our leading scorer missed 2 weeks when we played this team. And then that coach will come back and say, yeah, we beat that team without their leading scorer when we didn't have our second leading scorer. And so I think a lot of it will come down to record and common games. But even from room to room, the 64 different regions or the 80 different regions, every conversation will be different. And that's why I think, with River Falls, Chippewa, and Hudson, who beat who, and then that's what we have. And that team will get the 1 seed. But ultimately, in a 5-team region, you're going to have to beat the best teams. Like, you're not ducking anybody. You're going to have to beat that team. So seeding really is less of a factor from that perspective. And even home and away, you're not going to pack the gym with home fans. Like, is home court advantage going to be as great when there's less people in the gym and when you're limited in how many people you can bring and not have a student section for the most part.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be interesting. Um, I think a lot of people would be very surprised how much how much happens at seating meetings that kind of makes you raise your eyebrows. I've heard many stories from you of things that coaches have said or things that, like you just mentioned, that coaches have done where you just kind of go, okay, that's interesting. I know Dan Kiefer, the football coach, has told me stories as well. And that stuff matters and it's very often remembered. Talking with other coaches that we're pretty close with through the years, stories where they're just like, yeah, this dude did it again. And it's like, it's fun. It's definitely fun. It makes for an even more fun playoff experience. Looking more into D1, 1B, it's got a couple, it's got Eau Claire North and Memorial, so the Eau Claire schools. They've taken care of business in non-conference. They're both 3 and 4 games over 500, respectively. Third and sixth in conference in the Big Rivers, Memorial in sixth, North in third. And then there's a couple Mississippi Valley schools, and then one Wisconsin Valley school in Wisconsin Rapids, Lincoln. So Marshfield, La Crosse Central, and Holman will join Wisconsin Rapids and North and Memorial. Look, Central's had a pretty brief season. They're obviously historically a power with the likes of the Davis brothers, Terrence Thompson, Kobe King. They do have a common opponent though in Eau Claire Memorial. So I'm not sure if La Crosse Central is going to try to play the we've been to state a bunch card, but Memorial should. Well, makes it interesting because North, Memorial, Central, who gets the 1, who gets the 2, who gets the 3. But like you mentioned, the seeding is going to be a little bit less important.
And in that's a 6-team region, so you're going to have 1 and 2 basically get a bye. 3 will play 6, 4 will play 5. In that whole section, the only team currently ranked right now in Division One is De Pere, who's in 1D. So I think that might be the coaches poll might be something that's leaned on when you get to the sectional because they're going to reseed teams 1 through 4. So the 4 regional champs will be reseeded, and there likely won't be common opponents at all unless teams were able to go to some tournament. Probably not going to be a ton of common opponents, so you'll just have to go by what other people think. And so that'll be interesting. Looking at the other sections just real briefly, because these are not necessarily Western Wisconsin ones. In Section 2, there are in Section 2, Region A, Neenah's the number 1 ranked team currently according to WIS Sports Coaches Poll, and Kimberly's 4. They're in the same region. And then in 2D, Cedarburg and Menominee Falls are both in the top 10. In Section 3, Waukesha West is the only top 10 team, even though Hamilton will be a great team if Patrick Baldwin comes back. He's just been hurt. And then probably the most intriguing region in the whole state, boys or girls, in any division, is Section 4A with Brookfield East, who's ranked 2 currently, was number 1 or was number 4 in the poll previously. Wauwatosa East, who's ranked 3 currently, was 1 before, and Brookfield Central, who's number 7. And so 2 of those teams, because it's a five-team region, 2 of those teams will play each other in the first round of the playoffs. And one of them will be done, on that Friday night when the season starts. And at this point, it's still jockeying for positions because that 1 seed obviously will have to play the winner of that game if they can make it through, that second round game. So then Franklin is in 4B, and that's the only other ranked team in Division One.
Yeah, that'll be a regional plaque that will hang a little higher in a school hallway somewhere. And there's tons of D1 talent, D2 scholarship talent on those teams. Like I know Brookfield East had one of the best freshmen in the country, and he just actually left the team. He's reconsidering, as really good players can tend to do. But yeah, that's exciting. Those are games that I might try to get just on a stream just because of the good basketball it'll entail.
Absolutely.
Looking at D2, which has a ton of, obviously a ton of former D3 schools. I'd like to hear your opinion on 1A, which is Amory, Ashland, Hayward, Osceola, and Rice Lake. Kind of from a perspective of Rice Lake, because we've got 5 teams that are below 500 by at least 2 games in one.
Mhm.
And Rice Lake, they've got wins over 2 of them, handily beaten Osceola, handily beaten Hayward. I mean, are you thinking Rice Lake's looking like eyes on the prize right now?
Yeah, they're the odds-on favorite to be that regional champ, and then heavy odds to be the number 4 seed in the sectional, and have to go down Alaska, which is not going to be great for them. Um, but yeah, they got a good draw. I mean, obviously they're one of the bigger D2 schools probably at this point, and get to have some of the D3 schools, bigger D3 schools in Osceola and Amory, come up to them. And yeah, Rice Lake should have a pretty easy time getting out of 1A.
And how does like a team like Somerset, because 1B is, I mean, it's okay to call that a little loaded. I mean, with New Richmond, Somerset, and Altoona, like if I'm one of those 3, if I'm as coach one of those 3, and I see a region where, you know, Osceola and Amory might get to a regional final, I'm like, and I got to play a team in Somerset that's played 17 games, or I got to play a team in Richmond who's got a premier player in this part of the state. Um, like Baldwin Woodville and Ellsworth would be the two weaker teams in 1B, and they've both competed with or beaten good teams.
Right. And what's interesting is just because this is all geographic. Um,
Mhm.
Altoona is east. I mean, they're further east. Um, Baldwin, Woodville, Ellsworth, New Richmond, Somerset. New Richmond's not super far from Amory. You
Right.
know, could
Yeah.
could Amory have slid down and um, Altoona have gone north? Like, what made you like? I mean, I don't have a map in front of me, but Altoona can't be. It's going to be a horse apiece, I would think, with drive times. Um, does some of that stem from the fact that maybe Altoona joins the middle border for basketball next year? That's a rumor that has some
Right.
legs. So um, I don't know. I mean, 1A is not great. They would probably be mostly seated below all the teams in 1B if they were together in a 10-team region. Um, and like you mentioned, having 4 middle border teams in Altoona. Altoona right now is ranked, or they were ranked ninth in D3. They're not ranked right now in D2. They beat Somerset, and Somerset just beat New Richmond. All things being fair, it would be hard to not rank Altoona 1, but you're going to put 4 middle border conference coaches in the same room with one Altoona coach. Um, do you want to? Then it becomes do you want to give one of your conference opponents the home field or the home court advantage in the regional final?
Right.
I don't know. Like if I was still there, I would say I can't seed my team, but I would seed Altoona first. Um, Somerset beat New Richmond recently. I'd have to seed Somerset 2. I would have to seed New Richmond 3, and then Ellsworth 4. Like that, voting with what I believe is accurate. Um, are you going to get somebody that seeds New Richmond ahead of Somerset? Probably. Are you going to get someone that seeds New Richmond or Somerset ahead of Altoona? Likely.
Likely. Yeah.
It becomes less clear about what happens. Um, and the girls' region is actually more interesting. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. Um, but to me, Altoona's got to be the one. New Richmond, Somerset have to play in the bottom half, the 2-3 game, and then Baldwin Ellsworth would have to play in the 4-5 to play at Altoona. In my mind, I don't know if that'll happen, but that seems like the most likely scenario.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's exciting. These are all, as fans for you and I, these are all just exciting opportunities for drama, for good playoff basketball. So I'm excited. Looking at, you know, some of the. Were you going to say something? Sorry.
I was just going to go through the other regions and sections.
Yep.
So, like we mentioned, Onalaska would be the premier team in that first section, Section 1. Medford's also in Section 1, Region C. They're both top 5 ranked teams. Across the rest of the state, there is a Section 2, Region B group of Ashwaubenon, Notre Dame, and Freedom. Freedom was ranked 7 before they moved up. Notre Dame's currently 6. Ashwaubenon's 8. And then Wisconsin Dells kind of by themselves in 3A. And Section 4, again, has Whitefish Bay and Wisco that are 4 and 3 respectively. And then Pewaukee's 2 in 4C. So there's a number of teams. In my opinion, Division 2 is spread out a little bit more fairly on a state level than Division 1, but there still are congested regions, to say the least.
Yeah. I think before moving to D3, one big thing is the avoidance for maybe a team like Altoona, for a team like whoever were to come out, the avoidance of Racine St. Catherine's is huge. Huge. I mean, we don't talk about a ton of other parts of the state, but Racine St. Kate's is one of the best basketball teams in the state of Wisconsin, period.
Right.
And they're in Division 3. They remain in Division 3 after the realignment. And that's quite it. Like, you know, as former coaches, we were objective with our players, but also you want to paint pictures in a way where they view an opportunity when it comes to playing a really, really good team. Walking into a gym with Racine St. Kate's and then your Division 3 school would be the hardest picture that's ever been painted.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and for a team, like if all things were to come together for Altoona, or if all things were to come together for Wisconsin Dells or whoever it may be, it's Onalaska. Onalaska would never have seen them, but Wisconsin Dells would have. It's a good opportunity. But that, you know, they remain in D3, and some of the teams in D3 that'll be battling. I'm really intrigued by 1A for one reason. Cumberland. I think that, you know, so 1A is Barron, who's 5-5, Cameron, who's ranked in D3, number 7. They were number 4 in division, or number 3 in Division 4. Cumberland, who's 5-4, they've won 5 straight. Northwestern, who's 9-5, they're first in the Heart of North, and then Spooner, who's 6th in the Heart of North. But Cumberland's won 5 in a row. One of those include a 9-point win against Northwestern. And coaching football and following football very closely, I know that Cumberland has some of the better athletes at the level of school in this part of the state. And, you know, basketball skill and basketball specialty can be, you know, is obviously important. I think Cameron's a team that has 2 kids that are extremely skilled. But if Cumberland stays on a roll, they're on a roll, and if they stay on that roll, it'll be interesting to see if they can make some noise, because early on they don't enter their stats into sports, so you just kind of see them lose games, and you're like, okay, maybe they're just not quite there yet. But beating Northwestern, some other teams handily, be interesting to see if they can shake it up and come out of that region, in my opinion.
Yeah, and you know, Northwestern's a team that you mentioned there. Northwestern has firsthand experience with Racine St. Kate's because Northwestern dominated the section 2 years ago, and then went and got running clocked by Racine St. Kate's at the Cole Center. The really neat thing, I think, as that shuffled in D3. I mean, obviously Racine St. Kate's is the favorite, but of the top 10 currently ranked teams in the coaches poll, 9 of the 10, or there's 9 different regions that have a ranked team. The only one that has multiple ranked teams is 4B with Kiel and Oostburg, but otherwise they're all spread out. 1A, like you mentioned, has Cameron. 1B has St. Croix Central, and they were fortunate, I think, to, you know, not having to move up, because they were probably right on the line. St. Croix Falls is going to be decent in that region with them. but Prescott goes down. So Prescott's in 1C with the likes of Mondovi, GT, Durand, Arcadian, Aquinas. You could see Prescott coming out of there and Central coming out of 1B. And depending on how they're seated, it's not inconceivable to believe that Central and Prescott could be playing in the sectional final.
Right.
Which, I mean, Cameron would have to get beat by one of those teams, like you mentioned, Cumberland as well. But to me, that there's a chance of that, which there would never be a chance of that under the old region because they'll reseed these teams. So that to me is neat. Wrightstown's the only ranked team in Section 2. Section 3 is loaded with 4 of the top 10, and Section 4 has Racine St. Kate's and then the 4B, which includes Kiel and Utzberg. So a better spread as far as top of the talent goes. But yeah, the 1A and really all of Section 1 to me, and it's probably that way anyway because it's local. Section 1 to me is very intriguing at the D3 level.
Yeah, Durand's a team that we talked to Coach Radetzky before I believe they were shut down, and I don't think that was known at the time, but they haven't played. On Tuesday, last I checked, they were 1-1 still in conference, so they have not played a ton of games. Seeding being a little less important this year, withstanding, they would probably not have the wins to maybe earn a seed that they're worth, because I think me and you both would see them as a very, very high quality team. And yeah, St. Croix Central, they would be my pick to come out of that section. St. Croix Falls is good. St. Croix Central is really good. We'll see them tonight play ball in Woodville. But yeah, Division III is significant. That's the one that, that's the division that you and I coached in and we know best probably. And it's very interesting seeing Stratford in there, seeing Colby, teams that I didn't even think about Colby one time last season. And now that's a team that has a potential, it's just interesting. But did you have any highlighted regions in 4 and 5, divisions 4 and 5?
Well, I'll just go over them quickly. So obviously Clear Lake is seated, ranked 9th in D4 at this point. They're in Section 1A. Each of the 4 regions in Section A has a ranked team. So there's Fall Creek, who's ranked 8th, right ahead of Clear Lake at this point. Hurley, who's ranked 5th. And then 1D includes 3 ranked teams in Athens. No, I don't think they're ranked right now. They were previously before they moved. Edgar and Marathon. So there's 5 ranked teams out of the 10 in that section. Hurley was ranked. They're not. So 4 ranked teams. But a good spread of teams in this section 2. Cuba City's ranked 1 currently. They're in section 4. But similar to D3, a lot of spread of the top of the state. So you should see competitive games, hopefully, all the way through the regionals and then the sectionals. In D5, you lose some of the D5 ranked teams to D4, which then spreads the you're just left with less D5 teams. There is only McDonald Central Catholic ranked in Section 1. As far as the smaller schools that are in our area, and then there is a region in Section 3B that has 3 of the top 9 teams, as well as Section 3 having 2 of the other teams in 3A and 3C, and then Section 4 has 3 teams seeded 2 or ranked 2. So 3 and 4 are definitely the stronger of the 2 sectionals in Division 5, but a lot of the local schools, even to us that are usually in the smaller area, all got bumped up to 4. So I'll pay less attention to Division 5 just because it doesn't really pertain to our area, with the exception of seeing teams like Luck. And your favorite team, Prairie Farm.
Yeah, Prairie Farm. They Probably don't have a shot this year in the boys level. Girls, they're okay. I think Turtle Lake staying in D5 is huge for them. Look for Turtle Lake to win a regional title, and for Turtle Lake to be in maybe a sectional final. Because they're a good team. They've got some good players. They beat Baldwin Woodville earlier this season. We got to watch a little bit of that,
Yep.
so they should be excited. They should be excited for that. But yeah, we can move on to the girls. I know you've done some prep there. What are some
Yep.
some
So to
does?
just to go through here and not spend too much time, but Division One, Hudson is the best Division One team in our region as of this point. Same region as before, with Chippewa, Menominee, River Falls, and Superior, but I would anticipate them getting the 1 seed. And De Pere is the only other currently ranked team by the WISA Sports Coaches poll in Section 1. So Hudson, I think, would have a shot to come out of Section 1. Section 2 is pretty stacked. Kimberly's ranked 1, Appleton East is ranked 4, Neenah's ranked 10th. They're all in 2A. So again, one of those teams is going home night 1. Beaver Dam and Slinger, 6 and 2 right now, are in 2C. Germantown, who's 2, is in 2D. So only one of those teams, which is 6 of the top 10 teams in the states currently, only one of those 6 gets to have a chance at a gold ball. In Section 3, Arrowhead and Kettle Moraine are the 2 currently ranked teams. And then Section 4 is actually, even though it was stacked in boys, less stacked in girls. Brookfield Central is the only currently ranked team in Division 1. But, Hudson's got a shot, which is neat because it's fun to be able to cheer for a local team, and Hudson's just down the road. So, that's who we'll certainly be pulling for in Section 1 of the girls tournament.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Moving on to Section 2. So again, same as the boys. 3 of the ranked teams currently are in Section 3, 2 in A and 1 in B. The 4C region of number 2, New Berlin Eisenhower, number 7, Pewaukee, number 8, Catholic Memorial, and number 9, New Berlin West is stacked. So those teams will probably all be playing each other in the regional semis. 2 of them get to play for the regional finals. They're the 4 best teams in Section 4. And if you get out of the region, you should get out of the section. Now, we play the game, and the team could get shut down pretty easily, but that region is stacked. The other 2 regions are spread out better, even though 2C has Notre Dame and West De Pere are both top 5. Looking at specifically 1A and 1B, more so 1B because that's where we have the middle border teams that are all not Prescott, but 2, 3, 4, and 5. Baldwin, Woodville, Ellsworth, Nourishment, and Somerset, and then Altoona. So looking solely at records, I believe, and maybe I'm wrong on Ellsworth, but all the middle border teams are above 500. Altoona is below 500. However, Altoona beat Somerset early in the year and lost to Nourishment by 2. So this is where the gamesmanship maybe comes in, because all the middle border teams could simply say, well, Altoona's got the worst record out of the 5 of us. They're going to be the 5 seed.
Right.
But the difference between the 1 seed and the 4 seed is really not much. I just talked to Coach Jensen briefly after they beat Somerset. I said, hey, that's really good for seeding. He's like, yeah, but we don't get to play the other teams before the seeding meeting. And that becomes the hard part. So, do you, if you're going to push Altoona to 5 or even to 4, is it better to be the 2 seed than the 1 seed if we're not really sure how they compare with the rest of the teams in the region? That's a question that we don't have an answer to. None of the teams in Section 1 are ranked. So, in that case, maybe getting a home game can change things just from the perspective you don't have to get on the bus and go somewhere to play.
Right.
But I would say that 1B wide open, and in even bigger scope, Section 1 wide open. You're gonna have bigger schools like Onalaska and teams like that I haven't looked enough to see how well they're doing. But I would think that Section 1 is really ripe for the taking for anybody. And that's exciting when you go into playoffs. We've Baldwin Woodville, that region, will get to avoid teams like Prescott and St. Croix Falls, who previously would have been the 1 and 2 seed in Division 3 Northern Region. So that segues into Division 3, which is pretty stacked. Unity and St. Croix Falls, both in 1B, and Prescott in 1C. Unfortunately, moving up from Division 4, La Crosse Aquinas, who is now the number 1 ranked team in all of Division 3. And
Right.
so that, we talked about watching St. Croix Falls and how, they want to make a trip right now to wherever the state finals would be. And the best team that we've seen on the girls' side yet this year. But they'd have to go through Unity in their region. They would potentially have to go through a Northwestern team that already beat them in their section, and would definitely have to go through Aquinas. And even 1D included 2 teams that were previously ranked in Division 4 in Neillsville and Osseo Fairchild. So Section 1 in the girls' side is pretty stacked. In fact, they had more ranked teams than any of the other sections prior to the switching. So there are 3 currently top 10 teams in Section 4, 4 currently top 10 teams in Section 3, and 2 in Section 2. So that there's a good spread there. But no team, Aquinas probably stands out from the group just because they've had such a history of playing well and making it down to state. But wide open again for the taking. Moving on to Division 4, locally not a ton of high quality teams. Fall Creek is ranked 5 in the latest coaches poll. They're in 1C, only team in Section 1 that's ranked. And then there's a number of teams in Section 2 and Section 3, and then only 1 in Section 4. So, I would guess that when, if the best teams come out of there, you're probably looking at, Section 3 and Section 4 being the favorites, and they just have to run the gauntlet to get out of there. And then again, with Division 5, there's not a lot of local teams here at all, aside from your favorite school, Prairie Farm, who's currently ranked 2 in Division 5. But Division 5 is pretty stacked in Section 1. McDonald Central Catholic is ranked 4, South Shore's ranked 10, Northwood's ranked 7. Those are all in different regions. So if those rankings are accurate, those 4 teams would make the sectional up, where you have 4 of the top 10 teams of the 16. Of the 16, you have 4 of the top 10 in the same section. And then 2A, 2B, 2C, 2D, nothing. And then 4 is actually where there's a little more intrigue because Blackhawk, who's been great in the girls program, they're ranked 1 in Division 5, but they're in the same region as Schulzberg, who's ranked 8th. And so otherwise they're mostly in 1A. 4 of the 10 ranked teams are in 1A, and then 3 are in 4 and 3 are in 3, but they're spread out a little bit more too, besides having the 2. So there's just a lot of stuff that can go. We never even mentioned that. You call teams like Racine St. Catherine's the favorite, but all it takes is one kid showing symptoms, tested positive, one parent coming home with it, exposing a kid that is a big part of a program, to shut down the playoffs for that team.
Yeah.
And so it's hard sometimes to, in the playoffs, you don't want to look ahead of opponents. But there's always the time where you can fill your team in the projected bracket, and then you run into a team where you're like, I just don't know how we're going to get by that team. And this year, unlike any other year, there's a chance that this team won't necessarily have to be beat. They'll be beat by something else.
Yeah.
And there could be a team that, the region gets shut down aside from one team. they get to hoist a plaque having not played. There's been teams that have been crossed off the bracket in the last week because their programs have decided to opt out of the playoffs. So really, it's if you can convince your kids to, stay safe, do the right thing, and a lot of times it's not even the fault of people that have to get shut down. It's just what happens. But if you can just win tonight's game and give yourself an opportunity to play, sometimes giving yourself that opportunity to play is going to be enough to win. And I hope that there's not a lot of cancellations in the playoffs because that wrecks things and it's hard to deal with, especially if your last loss is by forfeit. But there's going to be more chance for anybody just because of today's world. And show up and play the game, win the game, and then prepare for the next one. But who knows? It's the greatest question. Before, you kind of had an idea, and you'd say, well, this team's better, and you wake up in the morning and that team was going to show up. And now this year, you're like, well, maybe they'll show up. Maybe there won't be a game. So it's fun to look forward to. Seeding meetings should be happening, I would assume, for girls here relatively soon. February 9th is the beginning of the playoffs. So if my math is right, the seeding meeting then should be happening the weekend, 2 weekends prior to that. So next weekend already, the 30th. So that'll be, that's coming right around the corner. That's why we thought we would do this. We'll do one more episode before those seeding meetings, and then probably the week of the 1st of February, we'll preview the actual brackets. Try to figure out, get a coach on or two. So we get requests for coaches, but we also have coaches that say, nah, I don't think I want to talk to you clowns. So that's fine. We won't talk poorly of your program, but we just won't talk about your program as much because there's not someone to talk about it with.
Yeah, no, it's to each their own, and we'll just talk with whoever. But yeah, it's been interesting covering all this. Like you said earlier, it's why you play the game. These games will be fun to speculate about, but hopefully much more fun to watch. So it's exciting. Seeding meetings, like you said, should be coming up. And then it's, put up or shut up. And that's the best thing about high school basketball.
Yeah, and what maybe we'll be able to do is as these playoffs start, they're typically, Tuesday, Friday, Saturday. And then, you have the following Friday, Saturday, or however, Thursday, Saturday, and boys are Tuesday, Friday, Saturday. Like, we'll maybe be able to jump in and just do like a, brief recap of a night or a round or whatever. So look for more from us, Blackhawk TV. This was the Western Wisconsin Sports Podcast looking at the changes to the WIAA tournament for this year. I'm Jeremy Nygaard, joined by Jordan Lehman, and we're going to sign off for now, and we'll be back next week. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you later.